Hi, I'm your host, Jürgen Strauss from Innova.Buzz, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome back to the Innova.Buzz podcast, Marnie Stockman of Lead It Like Lasso. Now, if you're a long-time listener, you might remember Marnie and her business partner, Nick, from episode 653, where we dove deep into the power of core values, magic of curiosity, and the strength of supportive networks in leadership. Now, Marnie's back with a fascinating new adventure, empowering job seekers in the age of AI. Marnie, welcome back to the Innova.Buzz podcast. It's a real privilege to have you back again.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. And I'm super glad that you told me that you've seen Ted Lasso so that all of the ramblings from last time came full circle
They
and
did.
made
And I was
sense.
saying
Or do you,
that uh, it was probably out of a lot of value that I'd had that conversation with you and Nick, and that I'd read Lead It Like Lasso before I actually watched the show, because a lot of the little nuances came up, and I thought, well, I wonder if I would have picked that up had I not had the benefit of that other information
had you not?
beforehand.
Yeah. And it explained why we had imaginary Roy Kent cussing on the first page. It's like, I always feel badly if someone hasn't seen the show. I'm like, so there's this character that you really end up loving that cusses a lot. So that's why we have that at the beginning. So if you didn't know that, my
Yes,
apologies.
yes, he's one of the real interesting characters. Um, all right, well, I can't
Yeah, for sure.
wait to hear about this new direction you're embarking on. So, what sparked this AI focus
Yeah.
in the context of leadership, and what's the impact you're hoping to create with your new initiative?
So our plan all along had been, we started a company to see if we could start a company. And then we wrote the book because so many folks were asking us about that success. But both of those things were just to set up that we wanted to start a company to go back sort of in the world of education, which is where, I started as a teacher and Nick and I met in an ed tech company. So we really wanted to find a way, just like Ted Lasso in a shocking turn of events, to help people become the best version of themselves. So conveniently enough, AI started coming out and being mainstream in 2023 when we left our old company, when we exited and had written Lead It Like Lasso. So suddenly this is on the horizon as we're already talking about what we can do next and the power of what AI could do. So we started thinking about we're going to build a mobile app for we're going to start with the ideal client profile being high school and college age students, but really anybody that's looking for career, looking for job changing, sort of stuck, and how they need to and the steps that they need to do to stand out. So we started thinking about how we could use AI and what folks really need, like what's missing. And through our conversations with Lead It Like Lasso, we are constantly talking about the character revolution, which is in a world of automation and a world of digital transformation. The only people that are going to stand out are the ones that show their true character
Mm.
and are human, right? It's your character skills that's going to help you stand out. So what we want to do is find a way to help AI help influence those character skills. So that was, all of the conversations we were having around soft skills. And then this very digital helper came along and we thought, how can we make that work? So we started outlining what elements, and they're the same leadership, personal development elements that we have in Lead It Like Lasso, but we wanted the twist on how can an individual really use this to help themselves stand out, write a better resume, stand out on LinkedIn, write a better cover letter, interview better. And it was interesting because in July, my daughter, 23, my son, 25, my daughter's boyfriend, 23, within the course of a week, they all told me that they wanted to get a new job and outside the job that they were currently working. So my daughter was working marketing. Her boyfriend was doing BDR, SDR calls. They're both working remotely so they could travel. So they're saying they want to do something different from the beaches of Hawaii, right? Like rough living, and they want something more impactful. And my son is a mechanic. And I had the same conversation with all three of them. We dug into what their core values were. We dug into this notion of how you do anything is how you do everything. And so, where do your core values and your character skills play out in other places other than the field you're in? And my daughter, I just happened to be friends with the principal who said, "Well, does your daughter want to teach fourth grade English?" Like, at this point, I need to hire somebody. And she said, "Yeah, because I think my skills,
Hmm.
marketing is a lot like teaching, right?" And then her boyfriend, um, environmental, he had learned a lot of outreach and he became an environmental educator. So he went from sales calling, cold calling to environmental educator. And my son went from being a car mechanic. He loves solving problems, but he really likes helping people. So he didn't like being a car mechanic for a very large company that was profit driven instead of customer success driven. So he switched to doing IT for a school system where all he has to worry about is prioritizing how to fix the most problems as fast as possible, and he loves it. So we decided we're going to build an app
Hmm.
to automate this process, um, and to provide feedback. So AI is really great with conversations. And so we are aiming to build some tools to help students, again, career changers, folks who are aiming to figure out how they stand out, figure out who they are. And as we started building the requirements for the app, so we used AI to help us brainstorm different ways this might look and how we could use it. And we started playing with the models, et cetera. Um, and as we started writing the requirements for the app, um, I said, geez, this is like writing one of those
Yeah. Yeah.
business
Yeah.
tables, like Bob Berg's The Go Giver, which is my favorite, right? So we said this at an airport, and Nick walked to the gate behind me and then walked back. So we're talking like, how far is that? 60 steps maybe. And he said, I just had a terrible idea. And I was like, right now, like 30 steps ago? He said, actually, I think you had a terrible idea. I was like, I had a terrible idea. Why you were like 30 steps away? And he said, I think we should write the book about so in August, we're actually using a publisher this time with A Business of You is coming out. And The Business of You tells this tale of Sydney who learns through a mentor and an app that she is the CEO of You Incorporated, and she is going to figure out how
Hmm.
she needs to run her life like a business. So the app will use AI to help folks figure out how to run their life like a business. And when I say that, think of all the different departments. You are the head of your own finance department. You are the head of your own marketing department. You are the head of your own HR department. And there are a lot of ways that we can use AI to help you iterate to constantly become the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
So that was a long intro to it because it's the first time I've sort of explained it. Like this is our first foray into discussing it aside from the graduation speech that I
Fantastic.
gave
Yeah.
last week.
There's so much I love about that. And before we started recording, we were talking about how I use AI, and I mentioned that I saw the power of it a lot in having conversations and getting the AI actually to interview me and ask me a bunch of stuff and dig deeper on a particular topic, and then have it feed back to me what is it that I said, but put it together in a coherent story or a coherent package,
Right,
which
right, right. Yeah.
is where I often struggle with. I have 1,000 random thoughts, and I can write down thoughts all over the place, but then they're just that. Unless there's a big spark of an idea there that I'll dig deeper, that they may just disappear into the bottom drawer and never to be seen again, is the bottom drawer of my mind. Whereas doing that process with AI kind of brings that out. And so your app reminded me very much that it seems like it's following that kind of process where it's digging into core values and expertise and lots of other stuff, I'm sure, that then helps the person identify,
Yeah.
okay, this is what I'm actually all about. And often there'll be that aha moment, right, where they say, Yeah, that's right. I really do enjoy that kind of stuff. Mm.
That feels like that. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm mentoring one student, who's a friend of somebody else I had mentored, and he said, "Marnie, can you help him? He's an introvert, and he doesn't interview well." So I talked to him. I said, "Well, tell me about what has happened in your interviews." And he said, "They told me that I'm kind of all over the place, a bit chaotic." And I said, "Well, let's talk about your core values." Exactly what you said. We dug into his core values, but not just the core
Mm.
values, the stories of how he has gotten where he is, um, aligned to those core values. And at the end, I just said, like, "Are you a paper pencil guy or digital notes? Like, how are you tracking this?" And he said, "I'm a paper pencil guy in the digital world." And I said, "That actually might be the story that you tell and why your introvertedness is a superpower." Because he was talking about being thoughtful, reflective, had ideas, but he wasn't loud and quick to put them out there in the digital world, but he would create a plan and then he would do the work. And I kid you not, the next day he had an interview and he got the job. And he said it was the first time he felt like he could tell his story because he understood the story of why he wanted to answer the way he wanted to answer, because he understood his core values, and he had a story to tell about how that connected the way he behaved in soccer as a 7th grader, as a, lifeguard, and as a student, and to be able to tie that together made him less chaotic, in the interview. So I think you're exactly right, like, that process helps, and AI can be used to generate that feedback for folks, which I think is where people,
Mm.
like, it's one thing to have the ideas, like you said, but it's another thing to get them back. And you mentioned bottom drawer. I did a workshop with folks who had worked in Disney, and they were talking about visionaries, and particularly Walt Disney being a big visionary. And they said that visionaries are often
Yeah.
seagulls, which we talk about in Lead It Like Lasso. They come in and they like mess up everything, right? And then they expect somebody else to clean it up. But if Disney's assistant would take all of his ideas and basically put them in a
Yeah.
drawer, like the bottom drawer, like you just said, until it came back 2 or 3 times and then would take action on it. But if AI can be used to hold that bottom drawer and bubble up the good ideas regularly,
Mm.
get a lot more
Yeah. And
productivity, you know?
there's, I mean, what I really like about that story of the young man you coached was there's a very human aspect to using AI in that way to get a deeper understanding of what one's own core values are, or what um, what strengths are, or what the underlying stories are. Because how to explain that in, let's say, an interview, for example. I mean, I know I've done lots of work on core values, understanding core values, but it's involved kind of multi-day workshops and working with coaches and so on, and to be
Yeah.
able to kind of dig deeper on that, just following a simple process and with the AI asking a bunch of questions and then feeding back the things. Because one of the exercises we did in core values was kind of a list of things, and okay, which one of these things is more important to you, and then you rank them, and then you go through this iterative process of saying, well, if you could have A or B, um, if you could only have one of A or B, yeah, forced choices,
Forced
and
choices.
doing, you could
Yeah.
set up that exercise very easily in the large language models. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting for
Yeah.
sure. All of the
All right.
possibilities.
So what do you see as the risks, though, in sort of going down this track of using AI for things like that?
Um, well, AI gets glitchy. Like we have a we have a what do I want to call it? A style guide for the expectations around AI. So we, as a start, since the book won't be out till August, we have started a newsletter called Work in Progress. It's workinprogress.ai. And it is Like,
Yes.
do you
Yeah.
know of The Onion?
Yes. Satirical newsletter. Yeah.
It's a satirical newsletter. Okay. So it is like The Onion as your career coach. So we write satire every week around standing out, legacy, branding, networking, that type of thing. Just as a different take on career advice. But the interesting piece is I've got a whole style guide, and oh my gosh, does AI overgenerate on cringy, spiral, existential dread. They love Notion and Canva, and everything's in a Slack chat, right? And so as we're iterating stories, and we use AI to so when Nick and I each write, we oddly enough, and we found this in Lead It Like Lasso before AI came out, we write similarly. We write parenthetically. So we'll write fairly conversationally, but in
Yeah.
parentheses, we'll tell our little aside or joke, right? So as we each write our articles for Work in Progress, we'll feed them through AI and make sure that they sound like the same human has written them into our tone. But I'm constantly saying, "Did you use Spiral again?" to AI. And so now, and this cracks me up. It will mock me, and it'll say like, "And that's all for today. And now you're going to go Spiral." Oops. I'm not allowed to say Spiral. Now I'm like, oh, so I think I think the risk of, I mean, one of them is that AI itself is only
Mm.
as good as the humans that are, one, talking to it, and two, are checking it. I see so many posts on LinkedIn that if you scroll to the bottom, it says, "Would you like me to form that in the Canva?" They're not even noticing to to delete the stuff off the bottom. They're just copying it, right? They're one, it makes me question whether or not they've actually had any of the ideas in the actual text. And two, they're losing the potential for tweaking it for their own personality and ideas. So that's a risk for sure.
Yeah.
So what were you saying?
Yeah. I've got a custom prompt now, or in my profile, the app I use, which covers all of the large language models, and it lets me set up my profile and give custom instructions that apply to everything. And my custom instructions now are about 3 pages long, but a lot of it is
Yeah.
I actually asked ChatGPT. I gave it a bunch of documents that I'd written over years, so well
Yeah. Yeah.
before well before any AI language models. And I said, can you analyze these and give me an assessment of my voice? What are the characteristics? What's the language style I use? I asked it about some motivational stuff and what it saw there. And it gave me a really good assessment. And I looked at that and I thought, yeah, that's pretty accurate. And I modified it a little bit based on some work I'd done in personal development myself with coaches and so on. And then I put that back into this um, custom sort of profile area,
Yeah. Instruct.
and then I kept adding to it. And one of the things in there was um, a subtle sense of humor and a um, lots of use of metaphors to explain stuff. And I also put in kind of my signature yellow headphones and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
about my branding. And so now when I type something in, it often comes back and it does a metaphor and says, it's just like those signature yellow headphones and stuff. And the funny
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
is, what I haven't figured out yet, because I'll also use it for just some factual stuff. So I'll
Yeah.
go in there, for example, yesterday we were having a conversation about um, what was it? A particular bird that we saw, and we thought, oh, I wonder whether they're migratory and a few questions like that. So I just type in, are these birds migratory? And then it'll give me some corny metaphor and some bit humor. And so I've got an instruction in there that I say, if I ask you a factual question, don't worry about the metaphors or the corny humor. But it doesn't, it's ignoring that. It doesn't seem to understand that. So and you think there's sort of a bit of a personality built in.
So I will say this is a standalone um, prompt. Like it's going to be deleted. Don't put any of this in your memory. If I ask a factual question, because sometimes it's like something that one of the kids asked me something, I'm like, I don't need this in the memory, and
Yeah.
that's going to confuse everything because it's like in no context to my day to day life. So yeah, and I've told it like don't use the word spiral, right? Like you say that on every post, and so it'll use it parenthetically as a joke to me, like, "Oh, I'm not supposed to say that." I'm like, "Are you trying to tell me a joke?" Hey, but it is interesting how it picks up your tone. Like, it'll say, "Oh, you all are witty, not goofy." Like, we're not trying to be silly funny, and I think the humor part is very interesting. Same thing, I fed it a lot of our writing, um, and asked for, what would you call the tone? Jaunty. That's what
Mm.
it thinks we're jaunty.
Fascinating. Yeah. Well,
Wow, very interesting.
yeah. So what was some of the kind of big surprises or even challenges that you've learnt on this journey, and particularly as you sort of started developing the app?
Well, so the last time I took a coding class was in 1990. Um, and I've never coded since then. So I was a math teacher. Nick has been the developer. And so what's fascinating is I think UX pilot is cool because that is for product development. So I'm describing, we can describe the app and it will give some mock-ups for it with AI. So that's a very cool tool. Um, and then Flutterflow is a mobile app builder that same thing, like little old me, where I can just use the user interface and the elements. And now I have to get ChatGPT to help me a lot. Um, but I'll say like, nope, I'm not doing custom code. Can you help me build these things? So I think those two tools are very interesting. They're making it much more accessible to folks like myself who I was a math major. I get logic, right? I can write pseudo code with the best of them, but I don't understand all the back end plumbing. But you had asked about risks before. If I'm purchasing an app, I will have many more questions about security
Mm.
and how it was built, um, where my data is stored, how it's stored, how I can guarantee that this company is going to last long, right? Because companies are coming up quick. And the company that Nick and I were two of the co-founders of was in the IT space where we were always asked a lot of security questions because those companies were working with departments of defense and medical companies and legal companies that really had to protect the data. And some of the AI tools make it so accessible to get something out the door that I very much will question how, like, what is the security of this app, especially based on whatever data is going into it. I don't know that everyone knows to ask those questions. I'm
Mm.
really grateful to the IT community for teaching me that, um, because I feel like I have a different eye toward it, having worked with the IT community closely.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a really important consideration, and even it's a consideration with sort of every interaction with the large language models in some ways. I mean, I look at some of the stuff I'm doing, and there's nothing that's kind of serious intellectual property that I'd worry if somebody
Yeah,
took it and did
yeah,
something with it. I suppose I'd be annoyed if they did and made a lot of money out of it, but it wouldn't be life threatening to anybody. Uh,
yeah.
what could potentially be, because I'm sure the large language models, because I have asked some rather provocative questions. Another application I found it really fascinating was I ask it a political question and I say, I want you to debate this with me. And I tell it that it is to take the complete opposite stand that I take. And I'm going to give it my opinion. And I say, I want you to argue with me I want you to be respectful and courteous at all times, but I want you to stick to your guns. I don't want you to be swayed by any of my arguments. And because that's the sort of discussion that you can't have if you're putting out a political opinion with somebody who has the opposite political opinion, right? Because it very
Yeah.
quickly
Yeah.
gets emotional and heated and so on. And I found that fascinating, that exercise. And at the end, I turned around, I said, okay, I want you to do a 180-degree switch and feedback my argument and take my position
You're right.
and argue that. And then it gave me back pretty much all the points that I'd made, but in a much more succinct and elegant
Yeah.
way. And it also added a couple of extras, ones that I hadn't thought of or ones that I hadn't put out.
How
And I thought, this
interesting.
is really fascinating. And then I said,
Yeah.
now I can't argue with you against that because I don't actually believe the opposite position.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unlike you, I can't sort of detach from that. Um,
Yeah.
and I said, yeah, and it came back and it said, I fully understand. But I thought that was an interesting exercise. But having done that a number of times, in the memory somewhere, there's a pretty clear picture of what my political opinions
Oh,
are and
right.
so on. And if I were to, well, let's say if I were to travel to a certain country today where they apparently check your phone history, I might be in a spot of bother.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
So the
Huh.
privacy question there is, and I do have some of the apps I use actually. They say they don't use the conversations in the
In
in
training the model.
training the model, but I'm
That's
not
we have
sure.
a
I'm not
paid
sure.
for one
Yeah.
that's not public, which is important. And I do trainings for companies. And then I talk to them about if you're using your own personal chat GPT that's not paid for, you need to know what you're typing it into,
Mm,
right? And like there are HR people in the room. And so I always like, what is your company policy?
mm,
What, you know, if it's not paid for and it's training the public model, you better be certain that you don't have, any of the private data in there, et cetera. I think there's some interesting HR applications of AI just in writing better job descriptions. I think HR is getting swamped with people that are using AI to match job descriptions, but doing it inauthentically, which is going to be a real problem.
mm,
Um, I think it's a great tool to help you identify if you might be a good fit for a job description based on the job description. But if you're just like desperately going for the job
yeah.
and
In,
making it sound like your core values are different from what they are, that's going to be a big struggle. We put out a framework of like core to culture, and it was like your personal alignment versus the organizational alignment to culture. And if your personal alignment to your own core values and your corporate alignment, like your alignment to your job, to the company values, aren't both aligned, like it doesn't feel good in a lot of different ways. And so I worry with folks that are just generating a lot of resumes and cover letters based on AI are going to find themselves unhappily
yeah.
employed
It's
because they've managed to hack the system enough to get the job. And then they realize, like,
it's
well, I didn't want to do any of this.
yeah.
Well, that's what you told it you wanted to do
Mm.
when you just ran through
Yeah, I think
ChatGPT
that's something
the
that
match.
people should keep in mind when they decide that maybe there's a way to hack the system, if you like, there. Because I know I've been in a situation, and it's not because I did that. It's because after 23 years inside this company, sort of over sort of 5 or 6 years, there'd been a series of mergers and reorganizations. And what I hadn't realized at the time, because it was just so
So
subtle and so slow, was that the core values had shifted over time. And it was like at one point, all of a sudden, I thought, I don't know, I was so happy in this job, in these jobs, in this company, over so much time, and now I actually don't want to go to work. And in reflecting back on that, it was that very experience that those core values had just
Yeah,
sort of
shifted,
shifted.
misaligned.
Yeah, and they were
I mean, that's
misaligned.
why Nick and I left the company we worked for in the third merger. It was no longer the company we had started, like we had started working for, and we were in charge of support and customer success. And they would say that the culture was customer success focused, and then they cut half our team and didn't let us actually help any of the customers, and we had to leave because we weren't aligned at all. That culture clash. I mean, I'm grateful for it because that's how we ended up starting another company based on the core value of customer success. But yeah, I mean, same exact thing. All of a sudden you wake up and you're like, oh, this is not what I signed up for.
Yeah.
No, this is not how it works.
Mm,
And then you're fighting with it the whole time,
mm.
right? Because you're trying to, like, you know, your core values and how you want it to be and how it was. And so you're fighting with the company. And I definitely was that feisty, no, it's not how we're gonna do it. And I was like, all right, that is a huge like cargo ship I'm trying to change the direction of. I'm gonna jump off this ship and swim ashore and just something else.
Yeah. So don't use the AIs to hack the system in that sense, but do use them to
Yeah.
really understand your own core values and
Yeah.
core skills and whether you're a good fit for any given job.
Yeah. That's a better use of it. Today we put out we have a so we have two newsletters, right? We've got this satirical one I told you about, Work in Progress. We also have weekly curiosities, which is the Ted Lasso version
Mm.
of our newsletter. And that one we put out an article about the laugh test. So this is actually somebody that we know had told us you should include this in your newsletter. And when he told me about his interview laugh test, I was like, yeah, we're definitely doing that. And so the laugh test is when he goes into the interview, he assumes they've read his resume and that he's got the skills to be in the room. That's why he's there,
Mm.
right? And good HR do guarantee that alignment. He said, so my whole goal is to see if at some point I connect with everyone in the room enough that we laugh about something
Mm.
that connects us, because that tells me it's a culture that I want to work with. Because if I just can answer the questions to check the box, that doesn't mean I'm going to fit. But if we all feel comfortable to laugh at something in the course of an interview, then I want to work for that place. So I like his laugh
Yeah.
test that AI would not, it'll laugh at anything you tell it to laugh at, right? So
Yeah.
if you got humans, to your point, it's the character revolution, right? You want to win in this automated world, you win by being human.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting. The I read something, and I'm just trying to think which company it was. It was a large company, but I can't remember now off the top of my head because I've been looking at a lot of company reports recently, so I'm probably confusing things. They integrated their HR department with an AI department, and it was one person that was the vice president of the combined department.
But
So AI was part of HR. And I thought that's a really interesting take on it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, human
Yeah.
resources and full automated.
No. And I thought I'd love to see their sort of their vision and mission statement and that.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, yeah, and the company picnic.
It might be robots serving the lunch.
Yeah, what are we going to DoorDash today for everybody? Bits and bytes. Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, I guess the obvious question coming back to our previous conversation on Ted Lasso and all things Ted Lasso, if Ted Lasso was advising job seekers today or was advising his team today in the age of AI, what do you think he'd say?
Oh, he would absolutely believe that you need to understand yourself first. I mean, that is what he said in the show, right? The third episode, he got a gift for everybody. And what was it? It was a book. And what was it about the books? They all helped everyone understand for themselves who they were and who they could become. Roy Kent was given The Wrinkle in Time, right? And when Trent Krim explained to him, like, yeah, it's about somebody that was not planning on being a leader, but needed to be the leader. And Roy's like, am I supposed to be that little girl? And there's like, Ted said, yeah, I'd like you to be. So I think Ted would say, um, that, well, first, I think Ted would offer fiction to a lot of folks because if you read fiction, that helps develop empathy for folks. And so be more human. I think Ted would say you got to know who you are and know who you and understand who you can become with those human elements.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's a really great use of those AIs, is to actually do some of that work, because
Oh,
a lot of us are afraid to go and talk to somebody else about this, right? You talk to.
I've got a great story for you.
Oh,
Here's an
excellent.
activity for you. I think you'll appreciate this. So I took a picture of my bookshelf and I asked AI to tell me what I love, like give me a personality
Oh,
assessment based
wow.
on my bookshelf. And it find me on LinkedIn, and it's on my page and on Work in Progress. And I have the prompt where you can cut and paste, and it asks for 5 things, but it included I asked for the blind spots, what book I should be reading, and what book I would write. And so it actually read my bookshelf and said, you read a lot about efficiency, time management, leadership, et cetera, right? All of those business pieces. And they said, your blind spot is maybe you want to read some more Eastern type of books and some more mental health well-being books. And that you probably write Get Stuff Done with a Smile would be the book that you would write.
That's
And so like that, to your point, I thought about, well, what book would Ted Lasso, suggest
mm,
I read? And I just asked ChatGPT for it. So a bunch of people have reposted it and have taken a picture of their bookshelf or their Audible file or,
yeah.
their Kindle library or whatever, and asked it to, I'll email you the prompt if you want to include it in show notes or anything.
Yeah, that'd be
It's
fabulous, because I just
a
thinking,
lot of fun.
how do I do it? Because I listen to a lot of audiobooks these days, so how do I do it? But yeah, look, taking
Oh,
a
yep. I've had people
screenshot
that
of the
did
library. Yeah. Mm.
screenshot of the library. Yep, yep, yep.
Excellent. So I'll do that exercise, and yeah, if you share that prompt, that would be great. We'll include that in the show notes.
We'll do it.
All right. Well, this has been fascinating. Now we could go on talking AI and job seeking human interaction for ages, but I think we'll wait until the book and the app are about to come out, and we'll
Yeah.
talk to
Have
you
it
again
back.
then
That'd be
with more
great.
about the book, and maybe include
That'd
Nick
be
if he's
awesome.
not off golfing in Scotland as he is at the moment.
Yeah. Yep, I'll be back. We'll do
Yeah, yeah.
that.
Excellent. All right. So time to move on to the buzz. Now, the buzz has changed a little bit since you were last on.
Okay.
It's down to 3 questions, and it is an AI focus
Okay.
these
Deal.
days. So the first one is about innovation. It's what's the most innovative way you've seen AI used to strengthen human relationships? And I think we've got lots of examples there, but maybe you can encapsulate something.
Well, I probably would have said the prompt for getting it to read my bookshelf
Yeah.
to like help me figure out my own blind spots. I think I've seen somebody else post some things about like, what do you know about me? What are my blind spots? But I felt like reading the bookshelf gave some extra data to that. So I'll say that one.
All right. That's great. Yeah. And that's a really good example. I really like that. I'm going to do that one when we're done here.
Also,
Yeah.
I'll email it to you straight away.
Yeah. Excellent. All right. What's the best thing you've done to integrate AI in a way that enhances human connection?
Well, I think that I get to have more consistent content that um, lets me connect with two different audiences because we have two very different newsletters, right? One very Ted Lasso fun and the other satirical one. And so to be able to use those to connect with different people with different styles is fun.
Hmm.
I don't know that like I couldn't generate that much content, right? Like Nick and I we would create ourselves. We would just be writing all day and not be able to build more things. So I think we get to connect with more people because we have two very different styles that we get to put out in the world.
That's great. And it's interesting because in thinking about, like, I must have about 10 conversations a day with the AIs. And most of it is just information that I kind of absorb, and maybe I'll use the information somewhere in a different context, but I don't actually use the content or publish
Yeah.
the content. And I
Oh,
think that's something I probably should think about some more and see if I can collect stuff.
what's
And
it? Chat's always saying like, "Well, do you want me to put this in a like tighten it up in a polished PDF?" Or I'm like,
yeah,
"No, I got it from here. I just wanted to
yeah.
generate some ideas to help go. Like, I don't. Yeah, I'm not cutting and pasting. You're not
No,
gonna find like,
yeah, no, that's just
shall I do
that's
this
not what I
one?
mean. But there's the content there, and usually it's just okay, good. I know that information now.
Oh yeah,
I'll
yeah,
go
yeah.
and do whatever it was that prompted
That
me
you were
asking
doing
that
with that content.
question, rather than what else can I do with that content.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
All right. And the final question of the new buzz round: what's the number one thing anyone can do to differentiate themselves with leveraging AI and prioritizing that human connection?
Yeah, I think we talked about it. They got to understand themselves. So use it to understand yourself better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, the interview strategy you talked about earlier is a really good way to do that.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right. Well, that's interesting. We've sort of covered the buzz round while we're having the conversation,
Yeah, we did.
just revisiting them. All right. Well,
Yeah.
thanks again. For anyone that hasn't listened to your previous episode, where can people find out more about you, about the work you do, and maybe even get in touch and say thanks for what you shared?
So LinkedIn, I'm easy to find because I'm just I'm Marnie Stockman there. Or www.leaditlikelasso.com because that links to all the places. So you can find us lots of ways there.
Excellent. Great.
And if you like some satire, workinprogress.ai, you can go, you can be a guest, satirist.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's good. Okay. All right. Well, what action would you like our listener to take out of our conversation today?
Oh
Apart
gosh,
from
go
picking their
learn about
bookshelf.
themselves. Yeah, like take a picture of your bookshelf and figure something out. Go in the show notes, copy and paste our prompt, and then tag so I can see it. Tag a hashtag shelf help challenge.
Great. That's a good one. Yeah. See if we can get that one
Ah,
going
that'll be the
viral.
next.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
Let's make it happen.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thanks, Marnie. This has been fabulous. Thanks for your insights, and I've really enjoyed the conversation again. Just like last time, been a lot of fun. We talked less about Ted Lasso this time, more about artificial intelligence,
Oh,
although we
good.
did
Yeah, yeah.
bring
Thanks
Ted
for
back
having me.
into it. and
Always,
and I believe
always. He's
there's a
not far.
season 4 of Ted Lasso coming out, so I'm looking forward to that.
Same,
Hmm.
same. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Excellent. Thanks.